Beware of the man who speaks in hands. This is the warning given by the Riverboat Man to the player in the game Undertale. And while the man who speaks in hands is quite vague, the most widely accepted answer is that this is a reference to the man, the myth, and most importantly the legend, Dr. W.D. Gaster. But who is Gaster? How did he come about? Where did he go? And perhaps most importantly, is this what he looks like? Undertale seems to leave many of these questions up to the player's imagination, and while that can be fun, many individuals have attempted to answer this by theory and storytelling. The webcomic Handplates, which if you haven't guessed by the title, is your reading material for this video. I'm Bitmap, and welcome to Extra Pages, Handplates. Warning, this video explains in detail the story, characters, and lore of Handplates, an Undertale fan comic. I'm only going to say this once, read the comic by clicking the first link in the description. This video serves to fill in the blanks of what a casual read misses and delve into the deeper lore and possible theories about Handplates as a whole. With that said, welcome to Handplates. It's a comic about an insane mad scientist who creates and abuses two test subjects for his own personal gain and curiosity. I'm kidding. That's not what the comic is about. It's about loss, hard choices, poor decisions, and hope. Though you already know that, so let's start with a refresher. Dr. Gaster, the Underground's head royal scientist, is researching a way to break the barrier to the surface. He cuts some holes in his hands and creates Sans and Papyrus out of them, artificial monsters with unconfirmed potential. He breaks Sans' eye, installs the comic's namesake onto the back of their hands, and conducts more questionable experiments while the brothers' mental condition slowly deteriorates. They endure more experiments, figure out blue magic, endure more experiments, try to escape, and eventually the climax is reached, the IDF theory. Well, the testing of the theory, which goes pretty horribly by all accounts. Gaster sulks and slowly loses his grip on what to do, while Alfie sneaks into the lab, breaks the brothers out, takes the elevator, and wait, Sans, no! Okay, so Gaster dies, right? And then everyone kind of wakes up? Why does nobody remember anything? What's going on here? Take a breather. There's a lot of detail in this comic, and I mean a lot. I'll try to break down every relevant ounce of it I've found. To start, let's have a look at the mystery man himself, Dr. W.D. Gaster. W.D. Gaster, or just Gaster, is a mysterious character in Undertale. We know for a fact he existed, but the question as to where he is now or why nobody ever mentions him is admittedly haunting. On top of this, in very rare instances, references to him are inconsistently sprinkled throughout the game. By gathering all the info together, we can confirm a few things. First, Gaster was the head royal scientist and created the core. Second, it is said Gaster fell into his creation, or his experiments went wrong, leading to his demise. Third, Gaster speaks in the Wingdings font, much like how Sans and Papyrus speak in their native fonts as well. Handplates, as a whole, serves to answer these questions and create a backstory through narrative. In the comic, Gaster has a personality, one of a clinical, objective individual who rarely emotes. Despite this, he actually cares about his friends to a fault and commits atrocities entirely for their sake and their freedom. Of course, he's still a scientist, and sometimes pure curiosity can get the best of him. To start, the comic portrays Gaster as the last remaining monster of the skeleton race, a practically ancient member of the Underground, one who remembers the surface and survived the war between humans and monsters. As mentioned, Gaster speaks in his native font of Wingdings. In the story, these ciphers are incomprehensible fonts to other monsters, but the skeletons solved that communication issue long ago with sign language, which Gaster uses with his friends. Speaking of friends, Gaster does in fact have some, despite being a bit of a shut-in to his work like Alfie's. Asgore is his best friend, Azrael was like a nephew, Alphys herself is a respected colleague, and finally Toriel, who is presumed to be dead after fleeing back to the ruins, was like a mother to him. So wait a sec, that's hardly how he's portrayed in the comic, right? He's cold, uncaring, almost evil? Why would he do everything he does if he is a caring individual? Well, that's actually the exact reason. He loves his friends to a fault, willing to sacrifice his own well-being for them, and to go much farther than any of them would have wanted for their sakes. In particular, after Asgore's declaration to kill and capture 7 human souls, Gaster started research on an alternative method to break the barrier. One that would spare his best friend from having to kill anyone ever again. So he starts his project, to break off a part of his soul to create an artificial being, to save the Underground, or to save his friends. But it doesn't go quite as expected, now does it? So, the brothers, Sans and Papyrus, as I'm sure you're already familiar. Creating the brothers is a bit of an ordeal for Gaster. He needs a large enough chunk of magical material, aka his soul, in order for the experiment to have a chance. Since monsters' bodies are a direct manifestation of their soul, he cuts the pieces right out of his hands. This means the brothers are, in terms of their souls, blueprinted from Gaster himself. Because of this, they are both skeletons, and one of the first scenes of them showcases a signature skeleton trait, eye glowing. Eye glowing is a bit of an enigma. It's an expression of magic which helps skeletons, particularly ones with frozen features like Sans, show what they're feeling. Each color has a general set of emotions tied to it, while a skeleton's natural color is pretty much their default. However, eye glowing is actually quite rare among mature skeletons, only happening in highly emotional situations or around close friends. On top of inheriting the physical qualities of their creator's race, Sans and Papyrus also inherit some other quirks as well, in particular, spoken fonts. In the Handplates universe, skeletons are creatures capable of seeing an individual's words as they are spoken, thus leading everyone to have their own font. Gaster remarks Sans is lowercase, Papyrus is uppercase, but then quickly crosses it out, a tradition of whenever he shows emotion in his notes about the pair. Though it's only mentioned in passing at the beginning, Sans is confirmed to be quite fragile. In fact, it's later shown that all his base stats are low, virtually no HP, defense, or attack. Now hold up, you might be going, "Wait, I remember fighting Sans in game, you're lying, Bip." Well, that was after he developed the ability to dodge, drain health through karmic retribution, and skip his target's invincibility. Before that, he was just about the weakest skeleton to ever exist, and Gaster was always forced to do things like bone marrow extractions inside of MD solution. Oh, and speaking of Sans' portrayal in game, there is one signature aesthetic he possesses during the final fight, a glowing left eye. As shown in both Handplates and the game, he can manifest a pupil in his blind eye, but it's just that, blind and non-functional for glowing and sight. But anyway, back on track. Once Gaster fixes the output and successfully starts the emitter sessions, it's shown both the brothers are capable of seeing, a sort of time-transcending vision. Gaster implies it's both forward and backward, though when the brothers look forward to the last thing they see, something interesting occurs. We're given visions of their respective ends in the genocide route. We'll get back to that later though. For now, notice something about Sans. In Undertale, he's one of the two characters capable of understanding the player's timeline-altering abilities via saving. It can be inferred this is Sans using his seeing powers to look across time and discover what the player is doing. On a different note entirely, there is another specific mark of consistency throughout the comic: attacks. When the first proper attack is introduced, Papyrus's defensive structure, it's important to note that they deal identical damage to the game. White bones do 4 damage, blue do 3. This also implies Papyrus never kills anything throughout his lifetime, as his damage and therefore LV is equal to his encounter with the human. Although, these aren't the only two types of bones shown, there are also transparent bones. Admittedly less important, Papyrus is shown to play around with structures of them in their cell, and as described, they deal no damage. This is parallel to the transparent attacks, mostly text, shown in the game, which are incapable of dealing damage as well. Perhaps more notably, and only seen once in the game, are the Gaster Blasters. These are given to the brothers by Gaster, although they can be manifested independently of him. Sans in particular, even after getting a hold of them, cannot deal more than 1 damage since he does not possess Karmic Retribution or Invincibility skip yet. On the other hand, it is unknown why Papyrus never uses them in-game, perhaps it's due to his trauma or inability to remember how. But enough about those two. What else does Handplates answer that couldn't be found easily? Many things in fact. Enough to be a bit overwhelming, so we'll go over them in an organized fashion once again. First of all, and one of the first chronologically, is healing. As mentioned by Gaster, healing is a property of emotional capacity and a monster's HP. All monsters are capable of it, but to varying degrees. Papyrus can heal well, Sans does not possess the HP required, and Gaster is losing his emotional capacity. Which is actually a common misconception. Cutting holes in your hands has nothing to do with your healing abilities, but becoming emotionally distant does. And Gaster is, if nothing else, emotionally distant. But the counter to healing is damage, and in some scenes Gaster inflicts some pretty specific and painful damage. Through remarks and passing, we can confirm monsters can see each other's HP, skilled combatants can tweak their damage output exactly, and inanimate objects can be used to test the damage output of a monster's attacks, much like the dummy in the intro of Undertale. What about blue magic though? It's shown as not inherently damaging, more of a tool than anything, and it's explained in some extra art that blue magic is kinda just a skeleton thing. Sans and Papyrus themselves inherited it from Gaster. However, they also got traumatized about using it, something that would later get recovered from or forgotten about, as they both commonly use it in-game. So, on another topic, what about those power surges? They kinda just happen at the exact wrong time, and it's not like there's any real reason for them, right? Gaster just sorta built the core with mistakes? Nope. A power surge, as shown, is the direct result of a monster falling into the core. Multiple have fallen in, causing various power surges, and each time the given monster is erased from existence. Memories fill the gap, reality shifts its walls. We'll go into this more later though. Now we get to the crazy stuff. Timeline shifting, reality jumping, alternate universe accessing, messes of experiments which prove to be a little too real. So what happens when monsters fall into the core? Well, arguably, they become part of the Thing, an amalgam of timeless sentience which seems to exist between realities. Gaster, in his panic about Asgore's killing of the second final human, fires up the IDF experiment, the culmination of his research in an area he himself barred off from testing due to the risk. Essentially, it states that there are weak points in reality that can be accessed, and seemingly by use of the brothers' seeing capabilities, Gaster pinpoints the location of one of these weak points. While he was just trying to see past the weak point, a rift was accidentally opened where the Thing came through. Following a few foreboding warnings, and a bit of combat, the experiment is shut down, leaving the royal scientist to contemplate his discovery. So what exactly was that all about? Why was the Thing so ominous? Why is Gaster's magical signature missing from the core? And finally, why is Gaster's head drawn that way? Well, strap in, it's time for the climax, Erasure. Erasure, as I'm terming it for the sake of this video, is what happens when an individual is erased from existence. Simple, right? Well, not exactly. By falling into the core, a monster meets an unknown fate, and those who knew it proceed to entirely forget their companion's existence. The memories are wiped, their minds fill the gaps, but interestingly enough, the actions stay. As shown in Gaster's case, there's a bit of reality shifting as well, but it seems to be on the minimal side as the gaps filled don't entirely change the past. Also, since erasure causes a monster to lose their ties to reality and time, it can have some precursor effects, like Gaster's missing magical signature. Overall, it's a bit of a soft interpretation of the timeline shenanigans concept, but one with some definites backing it up. The quote, "we always hire in pairs," is pretty solid evidence that reality isn't completely changed, but memories are. Finally, perhaps the one piece of contradicting information I've found in this comic is the route. In all truthfulness, there's some explanations, but let's look at the facts first. In the intro comic, Frisk can be seen interacting with Sans and Papyrus in a peaceful manner, making pasta and chatting. This implies a pacifist route, or at the very least a neutral one. Frisk cannot be friends with both the brothers before fighting Papyrus. Of course, you could easily argue that Papyrus's dating outfit means it's definitely pacifist, but hey, I'm not gonna split hairs. If that's the case, however, then why later in the comic do the brothers look forward in time and find themselves meeting their demise in the genocide ending? On the one hand, this could be simple inconsistency, but considering these were the first two comics written chronologically, that's unlikely. The more reasonable explanation is, considering the story has to do with time manipulation, the last thing the brothers see is, in fact, their last life, the last reset, the last save. Frisk, after completing a true pacifist run, decides to take another turn like so many players did. Reset the game. Reset it all, just to see what happens. And that's what many of you did, didn't you? Hello, and if you've actually made it this far in the video, then there's only one thing I have to say. I can stop doing this voice now. It's actually a real hassle to keep up, and half the time I'm going over my lines and making sure the enunciation is kind of alright at least. But either way, I'm glad you actually watched the entire video to its completion, and you're here now, and this is the only part of the video which is unscripted, and I'm literally just going to be rambling on for a while and then chop together the interesting bits because there's not a whole ton to say, but there is a couple of things. I mean, to start, the video took, if I'm looking at my calendar right, it took 4 weeks from inception to completion, and I'm currently on the Friday night recording this after the final edit has been put through, and tomorrow, assuming things go well, I'll be uploading the final cut to the official channel. So there's been a lot of back and forth for ideas and for concepts and for editing tricks I've done in this video, and a lot of discussion with people who most of them haven't read Handplates, but kind of just to gain insight and, you know, like, does this work here, does this work there? But either way, this is my first attempt at ever doing a video essay style, well, a video format style of essay thing. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. There's definitely a handful of things wrong with it, and I'm sure that if, you know, this makes it to the people who actually read Handplates, they'll be able to pick them out pretty easily. There's a couple of things that I would go back and re-record, but it's really just not worth the hassle at this point since the majority of it's already been locked down. So yeah, if you actually have any recommendations for other comics or other videos to do, leave them in the comments. I can't guarantee that I'll ever get to any of them, but it'll at least make me feel like I did something good with this video. So with all that said, hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time.